Pakistan and India remain locked in a deepening diplomatic and military standoff following the April 22 𝐾𝐻𝐬 attack. As both sides dig in, the fallout is spreading, from border tensions to trade disruptions and missile tests. Here's your full roundup. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has described Pakistan's response to India's accusations as measured and responsible. Speaking after a meeting with the Turkish ambassador, he reaffirmed Pakistan's rejection of Indian claims linking Islamabad to the 𝐾𝐻𝐬 attack that killed 26 people. Pakistan has demanded a neutral international investigation, even inviting Turkey to be part of it. Shehbaz thanked President Erdogan for supporting regional peace and stressed that Pakistan's losses in the war on terror, over 90,000 casualties and $152 billion in damage, cannot be ignored. As Islamabad calls for facts over blame, its diplomatic push is expanding globally. Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar is engaging with global counterparts including from Greece and Switzerland, to condemn India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty, which Pakistan sees as a violation of international law. Both nations backed Pakistan's proposal for a neutral inquiry and urged restraint. Meanwhile, Pakistan's ambassador to the US, Rizwan Saeed Sheikh, told Fox News that Kashmir remains the core dispute, and accused India of fueling war hysteria with premature blame. He also urged Washington and other world powers to intervene before the region tips into catastrophe. But as diplomacy plays out in foreign capitals, tensions are heating up at the border and beyond. In Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Prime Minister Anwarul Haque accused India of deliberately trying to create unrest. Speaking at an all-parties conference, he warned that any aggression would be met with full force. Over the weekend, Pakistan successfully conducted a training launch of the Abdali weapon system, a short-range surface-to-surface missile with a 450-kilometer range. According to ISPR, the launch tested troop readiness and new upgrades to navigation and maneuverability. Top military officials, scientists, and commanders were present. President Zardari, PM Shehbaz, and Army Chief General Asim Munir all congratulated the teams, calling the test a reaffirmation of Pakistan's commitment to credible minimum deterrence. But while military signals dominate headlines, tensions are hitting ordinary people where it hurts most, in trade and transit. India has banned all imports from Pakistan, citing national security concerns. Pakistan has responded by suspending all bilateral trade, shutting down its airspace to Indian carriers, and expelling Indian diplomats. Digital censorship has followed. After blocking the YouTube channels of PM Shehbaz Sharif and the ISPR, India has now blocked the account of Information Minister Atullah Tarar as well. Caught in the middle of this fallout, Afghan traders are now stranded by the dozens. The Pak-Afghan Joint Chamber of Commerce reports that at least 150 Afghan trucks carrying goods for India are stranded at the Wagah border, despite Pakistan giving them one-time clearance to proceed. The problem? India hasn't allowed them in. The trucks, filled with dried fruits and vegetables, have been stuck since April 25. Containers of Indian goods bound for Afghanistan are also blocked at Turkmenchman. While both Pakistan and India have verbally agreed to facilitate the movement, customs officials are still waiting for written instructions. The trucks were moving under the Afghanistan-Pakistan Transit Trade Agreement, which expired in 2021 but is currently under negotiation for renewal. With truckers stuck, economies strained, and borders tense, the risk of escalation is no longer theoretical, it's real. As military signals harden and trade routes close, diplomacy is racing against time. Pakistan says it wants peace but not at the cost of sovereignty or dignity. With regional powers urging restraint, the next moves by Islamabad and New Delhi could decide whether this crisis calms down or spirals further. From historic shifts in Australia to rising political uncertainty in Europe and Asia, voters around the world are making their voices heard. Here's your international political roundup. Australia has made political history. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has won a second consecutive three-year term, becoming the first Australian leader in 2 decades to do so. His Labor Party pulled off a surprise landslide victory in an election shaped by soaring living costs, housing pressures, and healthcare concerns. In his victory speech in Sydney, Albanese said Australians had voted for fairness, aspiration, and opportunity for all. The biggest shock came with the defeat of opposition leader Peter Dutton, who not only lost the election but also his own parliamentary seat to Labour's Ali France, a former journalist who campaigned on lower medicine prices and student debt relief. Analysts say the result marks a major setback for the Conservative Liberal Party, long seen as the country's default economic managers. As Australians vote for continuity with a progressive tilt, another long ruling party is tightening its grip across the Indian Ocean. In Singapore, the ruling People's Action Party is poised to win its 14th straight general election, maintaining its unbroken hold on power for over 60 years. Early sample counts show the PAP leading in all contested seats, even amid growing discontent over rising costs, limited political freedoms, and high ministerial salaries. This election is also seen as a public test for new Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, who succeeded Lee Hsien Loong last year. Although the PAP remains dominant, there is rising pressure for reform, particularly from younger voters demanding greater transparency, equity, and political participation. Singapore turned 60 this August, and for many, it's a moment to reassess the balance between stability and civil liberty. And in South Korea, a presidential race triggered by a constitutional crisis is throwing the country's future into sharp focus. South Korea is heading into a snap presidential election on June 3, after the dramatic impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol for illegally declaring martial law last December. The Conservative People Power Party has nominated veteran politician Kim Moon-soo, a former labor activist turned right-wing leader. Kim secured the nomination with over 56% of the vote, but trails badly in national polls. His main rival, Liberal frontrunner Lee Jae-myung, currently holds nearly 50% support. However, Lee's campaign hit turbulence this week after a court reopened an old election law case that could disqualify him. Adding to the uncertainty, former Prime Minister Han Duck-soo has also entered the race, potentially splitting the conservative vote or uniting it through a new alliance. With the nation deeply polarized, the outcome could redefine South Korea's political trajectory. Meanwhile, Europe's eastern frontier is bracing for its own political reset, under the shadow of Russian interference. Romania returns to the polls this Sunday, May 4, for a rare do-over presidential election, just 6 months after the previous vote was annulled due to alleged Russian interference. The initial winner, far-right candidate 𝐃𝐚𝐰𝐬 𝐺𝐸𝐺, was later disqualified and is now under criminal investigation. Now, 5 candidates are leading the race. Nationalist and Eurosceptic George Simeon is polling in front with 30%, but faces stiff competition from pro-European candidates like Crin Antonescu and independent Mayor Nicu Cerdan. Key issues driving voters include inflation, corruption, and growing distrust in Romania's political elite. If no candidate secures over 50%, a runoff will be held on May 18. The European Union is watching closely, as the outcome may signal whether far-right momentum is spreading deeper into the bloc. The crisis in Gaza is growing more desperate by the hour, as Israeli military operations continue across the region. Civilian casualties are mounting, medical supplies are dwindling, and the humanitarian toll is staggering. Israeli air raids on the town of Al-Fakari, near Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, have killed 2 women, according to Al Jazeera Arabic. In a separate incident, an Israeli naval strike off the coast of Gaza City killed 1 fisherman and injured another. The attacks come as Gaza's health ministry reports at least 70 Palestinians killed and 275 wounded in the last 48 hours alone. Among the dead is a baby girl, Janan Salah al-Saqafi, who died of malnutrition and dehydration at Rantizi Hospital, a direct result of Israel's 2-month blockade, which has cut off access to food, medicine, and aid. The government media office in Gaza now says at least 57 Palestinians have starved to death due to the siege, calling for urgent international action to reopen the borders. As hospitals struggle to cope, the crisis deepens with medical shortages putting countless lives at risk. In Rafah, the director of the Kuwaiti hospital, Suhaib Al-Hams, says the facility has run out of most essential medicines and food supplies. Doctors are unable to treat patients adequately, especially children, the elderly, and those with chronic illnesses. The collapse of Gaza's healthcare system is now being described as total, with local authorities and aid groups warning of catastrophic loss of life if aid corridors are not restored immediately. And as the violence continues in Gaza, Israeli military operations are expanding beyond the enclave. On Friday evening, Israel confirmed a new wave of airstrikes in Syria, targeting what it described as a military site and anti-aircraft installations. At least 2 civilians were killed, according to Syrian sources. Meanwhile, in the occupied West Bank, a 13-year-old boy was shot and wounded by Israeli forces in the village of Zababda, near Jenin, according to the Palestine Red Crescent Society. These incidents highlight the regional scope of the conflict, with escalating military action not only in Gaza but across borders and throughout occupied territories. According to Gaza's health ministry, Israel's military campaign has now killed at least 52,495 Palestinians and wounded more than 118,000. However, Gaza's government media office puts the death toll significantly higher at over 61,700, saying thousands more are still missing under the rubble and presumed dead. These figures reflect one of the deadliest and most prolonged conflicts in recent Middle East history, with entire neighborhoods flattened and basic life systems destroyed. As the death toll rises and essential services collapse, Gaza's humanitarian catastrophe deepens. With no ceasefire in sight, the region continues to bleed and the world watches on.